Charlie Donnelly was born into an era of war and revolution. He came of age in Ireland that had fought a struggle for independence, seen a civil war and been partitioned. Connolly's prediction of a carnival of reaction made real. Charlie Donnelly was born in July 1914 at Killybrackey, near Dungannon. He was the eldest son of Joseph Donnelly, a cattle dealer and shopkeeper. In 1917, the family moved to Dundalk, where Charlie began his education at the Christian Brothers.
Okay, our panellists in this session, and the session is entitled Building a New Republic. So if we could try and stick to the theme, please, and try not to get distracted, particularly among the audience, onto any other side issues. We have Councillor Kieran Perry, Dublin City Council. He's been an independent political and community activist for over 20 years and was re-elected, topping the poll in the elections to Dublin City Council, where last year he served as Deputy Mayor of Dublin City. He has worked with the residents of Cabra, East Wall, Stony Batter, Phibsborough, Ballybow, Smithfield, Broadstone and across the North Inner City on all the issues of concern to those communities. He continues to work with and support many local clubs, organisations and groups across Dublin Central. On a national level, he has coordinated campaigns for the scrapping of the unfair water and property charges, for fair pay and decent employment, for proper housing and community facilities, against corruption, against the scourge of drugs, and for proper policing within working class communities. He's a leading member of the Anti-Fascist Action and has just returned from the Harama Valley, where he was honouring the sacrifices of the international brigades in their fight against fascism. He proudly represents the ordinary people of Dublin Central and was proud to serve as their Deputy Lord Mayor in their own interests, in those very interests. Thomas Pringle. Thomas is going to chair the session. Thomas Pringle is a left-wing independent politician and a Chap the Dala for the Donegal constituency. He formerly served as a TD for the Donegal South West constituency, unseating the incumbent Tánaiste Mary Coughlin in the 2011 general election. He also served as a councillor in Donegal County Council. Thomas was born into a Republican family. His father Peter was a supporter of the Irish Republican Socialist Party. He's a patron of the People's Movement, which campaigned against the Lisbon Treaty. He was elected leader of the technical group in Dáil Éireann in March 2012. He's a member of the Independence for Change group in the Dáil. And in May 2016, he introduced legislation designed to retain water and public ownership and avoid further privatisation. Bernadette McCalskey needs no introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. She attended St Patrick's Girls' Academy in Dungannon. She was studying psychology at Queen's University Belfast in 1968 when she took a prominent role in People's Democracy. After engaging on the side of the residents in the Battle of the Bogside, she was convicted of incitement to riot in December 1969, for which she served a short jail term. She served as a member of the UK Parliament from 1969 to 1974 for the Mid-Ulster constituency. Bernadette famously slapped Reginald Malding, the Home Secretary in the Conservative government, across the face when he stayed in the House of Commons that the paratroopers had fired in self-defence on Bloody Sunday. She helped form the IRSP with Seamus Costello in 1974. And in January 1981, she and her husband were shot by members of the Ulster Freedom Fighters who broke into their home near Killybrackey. Bernadette stood as an independent candidate in support of the Prisoners on the Blanket protest and Dirty protest at Long Kesh in the 1979 elections to the European Parliament. She currently coordinates a not-for-profit community development organisation based in the Junction, Dungannon, that fabulous venue where we were last night. Her organisation is called the South Tyrone Empowerment Programme, and where she works chiefly with migrant workers and others to improve their treatment and access to services in the north of Ireland. Can you put your hands together for the panel?
Thanks very much, Garage, and I'd like to thank you for the invitation to participate today in the Charlie Donnelly Winter School. It's been a very interesting day so far, and hopefully this new format of contributions and discussions and that there will work fairly well for us as well here today, and we'll get plenty of engagement over the next 40 to 45, 50 minutes or so, and we'll try and see how it goes, and hopefully it'll take off, and the time will fly through very quickly, and we might have to cut people off to actually wrap up and finish on time. The theme of this session is on building a new republic, and I suppose what we'll do is we're going to pose a number of questions from the table here. So I'll ask a question of Bernadette and Kieran, and then we'll throw it open to the floor, and hopefully we'll get plenty of lively contribution and that as well. I suppose thinking about building a new republic would probably pose the question of about where's the old republic, and or what is it. And actually, when I was thinking about coming up here today, I have at home a copy of a receipt from the Republican loan back in 1919 that my granduncle paid into, and I gave it to my grandfather in the 1930s, and inscribed on the back of it he had, "In memory of our first glorious republic." He gave it to my grandfather, and that probably period from 1919 to maybe the ceasefire in 1921 was probably the only period of republic that we've had on this island. But maybe we'll explore that a bit more now over the coming while. So the first question I have is basically, I'm going to ask Bernadette first, and then Kieran to contribute on it. Is building a new republic, where did the old one go wrong? Bernadette.
I think it's a question that we should ask ourselves before we, get into the evangelical proselytizing about building the new nirvana. Is to really be a bit more clear about what it is we want to do and where we went wrong the last time. Because while it's important to see that the context of what we are up against, we cannot expect neoliberalism, which is a new phrase, to build a new republic for us and give it to us out of some generosity. Where do I think we went wrong in the old republic? I think we have to look maybe at the context of what was happening, and I agree with you, Tomas, that for a very brief period of time, we had within the First Dáil the embodiment of the building of the new republic, and we lost it. And if we look at some of the context around how that happened, I remember reading in a book written by William O'Brien in the late 20s, who was an MP, and not by any means a radical, on how the Irish Revolution was lost. And one of the things that he had advocated at the time, and it's quite prophetic when you look back on it, was that whatever negotiations were going on around Home Rule, and he said, was to give the Protestants anything, give the Unionists anything but partition, and give the Church, this was in terms of concessions, concede anything to the Unionists except partition, and concede anything to the Church except education. And maybe where we went wrong is that we conceded partition to the Unionists and education to the Church. And you could say after that we were doomed no matter what happened. I think there are lessons that we need to learn, is that often we think of partition as being something that emerged from the treaty. But if you look back, in a bit of more detail in history, again, those forces that were spoken of in the earlier meeting about the bourgeois class who are always accommodating and servicing the need of capitalism, that effectively partition was negotiated and basically agreed probably by 1907, 1908. But people were not aware of it crystallising until it comes forward on the table as a plan. And if you look today, that might well have been how we got the Good Friday Agreement. I think when we explore the history of the 1998 agreement, its formulation began in 1986 with the Anglo-Irish Agreement. So I think where we go wrong sometimes is that we pay too much attention to the minutiae of the differences between ourselves and forget sometimes to look at the minutiae of what our opponents are actually doing. I think there are things that we can hardly be held responsible for, but there are things that we might be mindful of the next time round. If you look at after the War of Independence, I don't believe that the leaders of the rebellion went to the rebellion in the hope that they would all be executed and make a glorious sacrifice. I think they were willing to take that on, but I think that they intended to survive and take that struggle forward in some way. But the decapitation of the radical movement by the execution of its leaders, and the fact that the depth of understanding of politics was not embedded in the rank and file, made the loss of the revolutionary leadership extremely telling at that time. The Civil War, I think, certainly didn't help. And the Civil War following on partition actually made the Republic very much a 26 county affair. If you look in the north, the sense of abandonment by the Republic of the northern Republicans, the northern nationalists, the northern Irish citizens, is not something that's clearly understood by the Republic itself, and didn't materialise again in any way where people could see it until the Civil Rights Movement. There was a belief held popularly in this part of East Tyrone that the Free State was never actually freed. It was rented on a 99-year lease, which would soon be up. So the degree of separation between the north and the south in terms of struggle, I think, was vastly underestimated. And there was an attempt to build a 26 county republic and come back for the rest another day. So I think all of those things at a practical level made it difficult, not all of it being our fault, and I say our historically. But I think there are things that we have to learn from that. And I take very much what Declan Bree was saying. You know, unless we begin to clearly identify who are the forces of progression with whom we can work and how we can work, and the people with whom we cannot, and the issues on which we can agree, and what are effectively red lines about not making progress on the backs of other people. Unless we begin to work that out, we can't put together the forces to build a new republic. And I think that, for me, is one of the key places where we still go wrong, where we went wrong and where we go wrong. When we do not succeed, and we're very good at not succeeding, we do it all the time, we look around all the time for somebody to blame, as opposed to look at it and learn from it so that we might do better the next time. And because of that, I think we've been caught, to my mind, in a peculiar game where we keep applying a methodology, a concept, a way of working that keeps failing, but we keep doing it. We keep looking around and say somebody sold us out, but we never fundamentally ask ourselves, maybe the way we're doing it leads us to defeat all the time. The British, on the other hand, and capitalism on a global sense, also keeps using the same formula all the time. And you know why they use theirs? It keeps winning. So I think that's where we go wrong. We need to critically look at how we've been doing this wrong for a long time.
Thanks, Bernadette. So I'll throw the same question over to Kieran, and then we'll go to the floor.
Just before I start, I'd just like to say thanks to Phoebe and the organisers for inviting me to participate today. It's been an excellent day, and thanks to them for the fantastic weekend last week as well. I think it's something very, very positive. I think this panel is going to be fairly handy for me, because whatever Bernadette says, I'm just going to agree with. Because to be honest, she's hitting the nail. She's hitting the nail every time. Just to do as I've said I would do. I think the two important points she's made in relation to what went on in the past is both partition and the loss of the revolutionary radical leadership. The Labour can wait philosophy had been deployed right throughout our history, and the concentration on nationalism and militarism. And I think if we had the leadership who organised the rising and the actions prior to that, I think they would have saw through that relatively weak argument. I think they would have been politicised enough to know what direction it was necessary to go in. I think they would have foresaw what would have happened had we went down the route we did go down. And I don't think anyone is particularly to blame. I just think it was a lack of experienced leadership we had. The fact that partition remained and couldn't be ignored, regardless of what some sections of the Labour movement wanted to do, couldn't be ignored, meant that those that seen militarism and nationalism as more important than the social agitation could use partition as an excuse to divert attention from what I would consider possibly the more important aspects of social aggregation. My assumption here is that most people in the room aren't social democrats, that people at this stage have made the decision that social democracy has been seriously exposed across Europe over the last 10 or so years, just practically destroyed, and people are now making a call as to which side they're on. So the people in the audience are probably a lot more au fait with the reasons for why we're here where we are than I would be. So I'd be interested to hear contributions from the actual audience.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Okay, so we're going to throw it over to the floor now. This is where your bit comes in, and so if you want to, anybody has any contributions, statements or questions out there, and maybe we can get a bit of to and fro and going. So if anybody wants to be the volunteer for the first one, yes, man up the back.
Virtually every business is standing with government help. There's not a business standing now, I'm sure in this town, almost shops, anything, handouts, any small business. So that makes them, they're an arm of the British state, because everything goes with that. And another thing, this very building, the council, see you started up an old rickety shop like years ago. You couldn't do that now, because you have to go straight. You see, we never were in this position in hundreds of years. You know, us nationalists, where we are, we're dragged to that side by this shower. And we marched with them years ago into this town and weren't going to get in. This is the same town. This is where it started out of that roundabout, and Bernadette knows it, and we were there. And this is where they have led us, because they never knew where they were going, these people. They're that stupid. And they just repeated history. But anyway now, where we are, you couldn't start a rickety shop, but the council in here would be on you. Any other business. You see, it can't work like that. You can't work in this present day world. Rates and everything's great. It won't work. But anyway, we hope the whole thing will go belly up and then that'll finish it.
Anybody else want to contribute there? There must be somebody who wants to come in or that there, or we can move on. Maybe Anne. Yeah.
It's a question. I suppose it's one that.
Right, answer the question. Answer. Don't answer.
We'll put that to the panel now.
Take a note of that question. No, I'm just Brexit, Éire exit, upcoming election. I just would be interested in your views on: is there any way that progressives can use our current place in history, given that the resources and the land and the wealth of Ireland is being given, not even sold, but given freely to the Americans and the Chinese, and who really the highest bidder. Well, not even the highest bidder, given all the shenanigans around that as well. But is there any hope for ordinary people? And is there any way that we can use this current situation to channel people's energies to try and take at least some control back?
Okay, thanks. We'll go with those two first. I suppose the first question basically is the current system that we're living under is stifling the community from actually being creative themselves. And and then the second question then is just sort of the current situation in relation to Brexit and how that's actually impacting on things. So we're looking for a volunteer from the panel to go first. So maybe Kieran this time, if you want to address those two questions, Kieran.
I'm not quite sure of the first question. The implication is that the imposition of paying taxes and going straight is a difficulty. Was that basically the argument?
States not rotten, how are we going to pay the come out and rate and all the others?
I'll do that question.
Yeah, lovely. If you would. Yeah.
I'll do the local one.
Do you want to do that one, as an elected councillor, I wouldn't like to be seen to encourage the non-payment of any service charges or taxes. Sorry, Bernard.
I'll do it when he's finished. I'll do it.
Well, I'll go on to the second question. The second question is sort of my forte, and I'm not sure if it's my answer will be what you're looking for. I consider myself neither pessimistic or optimistic. I'm a realist. I've always been, again, any people who have seen me speak before will know that I've been critical of the left and the lack of success of the left. And I think the lack of success of the left reflects absolutely everywhere. And I think I hope the purpose of meetings and seminars, conferences like this, is for people to critically reflect on what has went on in the past. Again, making the assumption that people here aren't social democrats, that people here are revolutionaries. I think it's really, really important that people reflect on what we have done in the past and why it hasn't been successful. And to make the point, we've just come out of the deepest recession since the Great Depression. And yet, if we judge our strength electorally, and I'm not saying we necessarily should, but it's one method of judging our strength, it's really, really poor. If people had predicted the depth of the recession prior to this, I would imagine they would have predicted that there would have been huge swings to the viewpoints of the people sitting in this room, and that hasn't happened. I think people need to ask themselves why that hasn't happened. Again, I don't see any real value in people like myself or Brenda speaking to the converted. I think the whole purpose, I would again hope the whole purpose is to speak to people and challenge them, because we can point to our lack of success, and I think it's incumbent on people to ask themselves, why have we been unsuccessful? Going back to the critique of the left, the class composition of the left, I think, is a difficulty in the fact that they can't generally relate to ordinary people. And I think that what has happened across Europe, and with Trump, Brexit, the rise of the extreme right, not alt-right, extreme right, fascist Nazis, is a serious reflection on the left worldwide. These people are our constituency. They're stealing our constituency, and they're winning, and we're not. We need to ask why. Again, from my own point of view locally, we point out issues like, say, drugs, antisocial, policing. The left aren't comfortable addressing any of those issues. The constituencies we represent, we won't be representing Ballsbridge in Dublin. We won't be representing Castleknock in Dublin. These are the rich areas. We'll be representing the working class areas. And the concerns of working class people must be our priority to address. If we can address their concerns to some degree, we'll gain a respect that we can then follow up with a discussion of our radical politics. Until we get to the stage where we have the trust of our constituents, of our constituency, of our the people who our neighbours, our families, our workmates, I don't think we're going to progress hugely. The couple of issues I've made, the anti-drugs movement in Europe, again, baby, probably sick of me talking about this, was a huge learning curve for me and for the people associated with me. And none of the left touched that issue with a barge pole. It was the most important working class issue in Dublin at the time, and nobody from the left, apart from Sinn Féin, to be fair to them. And Sinn Féin were forced to address it because they live in the communities like ourselves. The same with antisocial behaviour, the same with policing. We're not stupid. We know the police are here to enforce the current system. We don't have any great belief that they're going to protect us. But to go into a working class community and tell them that the police are bastards, for want of a better word, what's our alternative? That's what I think people need to ask. And the nub of the argument for me at the moment is immigration. The left is not being seen as radical by ordinary people. The left is being seen as liberal on the issue of immigration. Brexit was clear on that, and I don't accept Brexit was a racist vote. There was part of it that must be acknowledged. I don't even accept that Trump was exclusively a racist vote. What you had was working class people with absolutely nothing to lose. In their minds, they have something to lose, but in their minds, absolutely nothing to lose, who've been kicked to death by the system and felt there was no loss in looking elsewhere. And they've looked at those issues. If the left don't address those issues, particularly immigration at the moment, I think we're in big, big trouble. And Anne, I know that doesn't really answer the question you've asked, but I think it's the basis for any sort of influence we have in relation to Brexit. Like Brexit, Lexit was barely even mentioned. I personally would be pro-Lexit. I would have huge difficulties with the EU. It's not the norm within the left in Ireland that you would be anti-EU. I personally would be. But Lexit had no impact at all. Brexit had the impact. And I just think that points to our weaknesses. And I don't want to be overly pessimistic, because I'm not a pessimist. I wouldn't be here wasting my time or wasting your time if I was a pessimist. I think that the quality of the people in the room, the quality of people engaged in Republican, socialist struggle is absolutely fantastic. But I think it needs to be honed, and I think there is an opportunity that's a social democracy that's not a rival to our politics anymore. It's been exposed on every occasion when the system put up to social democracy. They folded. Across the world they folded. We're the only ones left, and if we can't get our act together, we're in trouble.
Thanks, Kieran.
Well, I think taking the position of the gentleman at the back, and I think the two questions and your own contribution come together in that. I think what we're looking at, and I know what the gentleman at the back is saying, there's a sense, if you start just from where we started, if you like, out there at that roundabout, from people who we weren't allowed to congregate in the square, and certainly when we got the length of that roundabout, the idea that we would ever be sitting in a public building discussing Charlie Donnelly, well, you'd have said, take that poor child home. She's on the drink, because it was not in anybody's mind. And somehow then, when we find there's two things. When we find ourselves sitting as citizens of Dungannon, exercising our capacity and our right as citizens of Dungannon to have a discussion about our history, our past, our future, our politics, in our civic building. We can't quite believe it, and we don't know whether we won or lost. We don't know whether we won and have exercised our right to speak our minds in a public place, or whether we've been co-opted. We don't know. Now, this gentleman here says we've been co-opted, which is interesting because you're here. But I understand what the frustration then that comes in saying, right, for what we appear to have paid for it, what we have got is merely being drawn into regulation and very little to show for it. And part of that is because, you say because people didn't know where they were going. No. Wait a minute, you sit and I'll talk for 2 minutes because I've got the front seat. So what I'm saying is that it's not really that people didn't know where they were going in the short term. It's that people knew where they were leaving. People in the community want to get from the intolerable position that they're in. Whether that's poverty, whether that's lack of political rights, civil rights, social, economic conditions. Their immediate drive is to get beyond here, because here is no place to be. And the failure, I think, of those of us who have ideas or vision about where we want to go is that in the movement we do not share, embed that reality in other people. We encourage people simply to follow. Yes. And then people don't make independent decisions. We don't think critically, we don't organise, we don't actually believe, and I think that's the difference between the ideological left and the practical working every day in a community. I am of the left. I sit in the community and work every day, and the core every day of my work is immigration. And believe me, the working class is consciously or unconsciously at this point racist. And we are deluding ourselves that it is not. We are deluding ourselves that it is not. It's not ideologically racist. Working people are not ideologically racist. In their living behaviours, their behaviours are racist because they do not have the tools, they do not have the critique, they do not have the conversations to challenge the dominant conversation that poses their working and social conditions in the context that it is their fault. There's too many foreigners coming in here to this time. There's too many foreigners coming into this country. Now the reality, if we deal in facts, does anybody in this room know who in the British Isles, that is the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, does anybody know who is the single biggest contributing country to illegal immigrants? What's the biggest number of illegal immigrants on these islands? Anybody can tell me at the count of 3. White, male Australians under the age of 25. Countries flooded with them. Flooded with them. White, male Australians under the age of 25. And you know why you don't notice them? They look like you, they walk like you, and after a very short period of time they get rid of that very annoying accent and learn to talk like you. And so, and all the other narratives get, so I think we do need to be very clear about that. Not in saying that people are racist, but that a key driving point of that is dividing the working class is that while we can talk about building our new republic in the context of a global world, we are still talking about building that republic as if somehow it belongs within an unbroken narrative of people whose genetic origin can be traced by their grandparents and great-grandparents to this island. If we look at what was said in the last session, was it 79% in 2010, the industrial workers are in the southern hemisphere, then let me tell you something that you need to know now. The revolution ain't white. The revolution will not be white. So anybody here that's thinking of leading it, miss the boat, miss the boat. The leadership of the revolution will come out, because Karl Marx said it and his word is true. The leadership of the revolution will come out of the industrial working class, so it can't be white in the 21st century. It will be brown, it will be yellow, it will be black, it will be Asian, it will be Syrian, it will be Venezuelan, but we will, as Yankee Peter McGrath said a long time ago, we'll be running after it with our rosary beads clutched in our hands. That's how we'll do it. So if we're talking about building the new republic, and coming back to your question, what do we do about it now? I know what I'm doing about it. I'm working to elect Eamon McCann. The rest of you can do whatever you like.
Okay, we have two contributors, three now, so we might take as a questions or contributions. First is Beppe, and then the man up the back, and then John. That'll be it then. Oh, Gareth has told us that'll be it then. We'll get a quick summing up from the panel then after these.
Thank you very much for the interventions. I want to start probably with a small commentary and then to move into I think a very important question. The first one is just to realise that revolutionary moments don't tend to happen when people like us are aware of things, because we're aware of the time of these things, we discuss them all the time. Revolutionary moments happen when people that are not in meetings like this take to the street. And that's the most important thing. And actually those revolutionary moments turn into revolutions when there is a core of organised people that are in communication with them, that are understood by them, and can turn the situation into something more. Now, I think that we've talked a lot about communities, and what I think is that we talk an awful lot about communities, and usually we talk about things we don't have. And unfortunately, I think that community is something that we're losing by the minute in Ireland, both sides of the border. The amount of people in Dublin, for instance, I'm living in Cavan now, but I lived for many years in Dublin. The amount of people that don't know their neighbours, that don't ever talk to them, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. I've talked to left-wing friends of mine, and I said, I know you're left-wing because we always meet in the hall here. How many of your workmates know you're left-wing? How many of your neighbours know you're left-wing? And I think that was the beauty of the water campaign, because in a way we were forced to talk to our neighbours, and that was a very good thing. How we're going to address them, how we're going to understand them, and I think that there's a risk there. And as a very competent speaker, I had to contradict you in any form, Karen, but sometimes, and this is politics today, that we just want to, as a knee-jerk reaction, we want to take whatever is the sentiment out there and turn it into a political platform. And they have people actually doing surveys and market studies about what's going to give them votes. And I think it's very important that we have pedagogical principles as well. We need to understand, we need to be able to communicate with people. But at the same time, we need to have our principles to interact with them, to disagree with our neighbours. And that element of pedagogy is the only thing that will make us more popular, more understood, and that we can turn our ideas into a proper alternative. And I'm speaking too much now, but I want to share a personal experience. You know, I am a migrant. I am here in an Irish Republican Socialist Forum, and I don't see why I shouldn't be here. Because Republicanism, particularly in the left variant, was speaking about universal values. Values that are actually as relevant to anyone living here, whatever, regardless of where they're coming from. Still, last February I was facing the threat of deportation. And I remember in 2004 I was campaigning against the racist referendum of Michael McDowell. And I remember leafleting people out of Grove Park. The amount of abuse I received, you can't believe. I was spat, I was beaten a couple of times, I was called all sort of names, and obviously all of that went at the end of the rant by someone saying, "You're not even from here." And I was thinking, "Oh, that's why I'm campaigning in the first place." But that said, I remember being on the bus and I was very upset, and I was saying, "Sure, I have Irish-born children." And I was saying that they didn't want to renew my residency and all that, and they told me very clearly in the immigration office, people voted against this in 2004, so you can't say that you have our children to stay here. And I remember talking of that on the phone, and an old lady beside me in the bus stop said, "Sure, I hear you speaking. It's shocking that a fine gentleman like you is going through this. We voted not against people like you that are hard-working, we voted against the chancellors." And I said, "No, you voted against us all." But the thing is that probably that old lady was the first time that she was listening to what a migrant was saying. So I'm not a pessimist on that. I think that possibly the racist sentiment is out there. But we need to create these communities. We need to put people to talk with one another. Because when we talk about one another, all of this collapses. And it's the same as well with the situation of partition. Frantz Fanon said in The Wretched of Earth that a colonized person or a white man or a black man will never going to be a proper man. They were just going to be a white man and a black man. It's a situation, a colonial situation that reinforces one another. The same here. A Catholic woman, a Catholic man will never be more than that under the conditions of partitions. To the same extent that a Protestant man or a Protestant woman will never going to be a proper woman or a proper man. So all I'm going to say to finish this is how we challenge that colonialism by creating communities, but at the same time, what are those principles that we can never change? Situations change, and when I was reading Brian Hanley, I got a bit of a bittersweet taste, and I'll finish with this. When I said, "Oh, class is not the same, economy is not the same, nothing is the same." Of course, we know that, but there are things that remain, and those are our principles. We can evaluate and reevaluate absolutely everything. We come from a terrible defeat in many ways, and we need to acknowledge it to learn from the mistakes. But the principles remain there. And we need to be able to look at the reality without forgetting those principles.
Thanks, if you want to pass that the man up in the blue, beside the man with the beard in the blue shirt at the second last row. And I'll ask the last two speakers to be a bit quicker.
Oh, sorry.
It's just we're under time pressure here in Garage. He's trying
Just
to
be very quick here. The question was asked there where we have failed. We probably allowed ourselves to be failed to be dumbed down by doctors, giving people opiates, by the media, who are putting us all in boxes and telling us the people in other boxes are a threat to us. And I think it's okay for people like ourselves who are politicised, but the people outside of here who are politicised, that's where it's failing, and allowing neoliberal, neoconservative media outlets, they dumb us down and they stop us, as was mentioned before here, they stop us seeing the bigger issues of water protests and whatever else. I think that's where it has failed, in my view. I think that's it.
You can throw it down, no, down the front, further down. There's a hand up.
Yeah. A question to Bernadette. It's a few years ago since I put a question to Bernadette before. It was outside Hammersmith Town Hall, 1969, I think it was.
A year or two ago.
Some of the things being discussed at the minute here in Fermanagh, we live in Fermanagh, so we're talking about elections, and you're talking about mistakes of the past. It's obvious. I mean, we'll all agree that we've made mistakes. That's why we haven't achieved what we want to achieve. So the elections, the council elections, I was told by somebody, will be in about 2 years' time. And what do we do? Do we sit on the sideline or do we participate? Now, that's not the point.
We'll get the rest of it in there.
Get the rest of it quick, yeah. Okay, well, we're talking about different forms of participating in these elections. All of the people that we elect seem to be the same. They work in secret. There's different, there's participatory elections, and there's representative. It's the representative system that's working at the minute. It's like giving a power of attorney to a solicitor. So there has to be some new approach. We can't afford to sit on the sideline. We have to get into it. So what system would you suggest
Well,
that would be the best?
Maybe. Okay. Thanks.
Everybody can now.
Thanks for that, John. So that's the last group of questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Bernadette and Kieran to address the three contributions over, say, 3 or 4 minutes each, and then we'll have to wrap it up after that. So we'll go over to Bernadette.
well, I'm going to say very briefly first, going back to my first question when I said that we end up talking about the minutiae of differences and the minutiae of things that we should do, and we end up here to do it again. If we are going to build a new republic, we need to start, as the gentleman at the front said very clearly, we need to at least have a very clear vision of what we think that new republic should be. That is to say, what are the principles on which any new republic would be founded? That's where we need to start. What are the universal values? And what are the principles that we would hold that are the founding principles of any such republic? And that's where that starts, not what will we do at the next election. Because if we know what it is we want out there, if we know what that outcome is, if we know what those founding principles ought to be, then we know what the dividing lines are between those who will help us to build it and those who will stop us from building it. Now, for me, one of the fundamentals of such a republic is that the resources, the means of production of resources, the means of production of wealth, and by wealth I don't mean that some people should be wealthy and others poor. I mean wealth as resource, should be collectively owned by the people. And there's a very simple reason why I say that. Because if we don't have that as a founding principle, then austerity, poverty, inequality are built into the republic that we're trying to build. Because the reason people say at the minute, why is this man here frustrated by regulation and not being able to be creative and get on with his life? Why are people poor? Why are people out of work? Why are people told they can't have benefits? Because we're told we have no money. And that's a lie. This is a rich country. We have money. But the money is not held in the public purse. Why is it not held in the public purse? Because the means of production of the money is not held in public hands. The single biggest food production country in the world. We call it my part because it makes it feel local. It belongs to a big transnational company called JBS, and there are 2 food production companies in the world who produce 90% of the world's animal eaten foods, of meat, chicken, pork. 2 companies could starve the entire world. I tell you, wouldn't long been vegetarians. But the means of production of wealth in our republic needs to be publicly owned. It needs to be democratically owned. Otherwise the Politburo will not let Bernadette have anything to eat because she's always criticising the leadership and she'll be first to be starved. So we have to understand then what democracy would be and how we create checks and balances between ideological representation, between interest representation, between geographical representation, and that only starts from grassroots democracy. Our republic has to be built on fundamental human rights. And another thing that we're in denial about is that in the 21st century, the very idea and concept of human rights is under attack. Fundamentally under attack. So those are our principles, and then we can say, how do we begin to work together towards them? Then we are able to separate out the difference between principles and tactics. What we do in an election is not a principle, it's a tactic. So some days one tactic works and some days another, but they must always be based on the core principle. And if you don't know your principles from your tactics, you don't know your ass from your elbow, and you never build a republic.
As I said previously, I don't see any huge value in me coming to speak to the converted for the audience or for myself. And the reason I accepted the invitation today was specifically to raise a critique of the left, particularly in relation to immigration, because I knew even people, non-social democrats, non-liberals, wouldn't be comfortable with. I think it's a bit disingenuous of people to accuse people with propagating this view that we're somehow populist. Like, we're not populist in the terms of the immigration debate. The difficulty for us, and it's time to wake up, the difficulty for us here is our constituency have a difficulty with immigration. So either we can lop off our constituency and go back to the colleges and try and recruit there, or we can address the concerns. Now, I'm not saying that we change our principles. I'm not arguing against immigration. What I'm saying is our constituency have huge, genuine concerns about immigration, and that's our job, to face them down. The left in general won't touch this with a barge pole, and until they do, we can see across the world we're in seriously big trouble. When Bernadette says racist, I understand what she's saying, that people are racists. I don't accept that people are racist, and she didn't say they were racist internally. They propagate racist views. Again, as the gentleman up the back says, we have a mass media pushing differentiation between every section of society, and the easy one is somebody that stands out because they're a different colour. That's an easy one. So they have this constant refrain from the media as this is the problem, not capitalism, not the rogue employers, that these people coming over robbing our jobs or whatever. We have to challenge that, but we also have to acknowledge that there is a concern. We can't just say there's some on the left, people will know them here, who call for open borders, unrestricted immigration. Like, how can anybody win that argument? Or why would anybody even want to win that argument? It doesn't make sense, even logically, it doesn't make sense. What keeps me going is the likes of the Home Sweet Home and the fantastic response to people in genuine need. Absolutely phenomenal. Nothing to do with colour. There was foreign homeless people in there. There was no difficulty. I believe that the majority of people are genuinely concerned about their fellow human beings. I don't accept that they're racist at heart. They may have racist views at this moment in time. But unfortunately, some on the left make that worse by putting them down and accusing them of racism, and not acknowledging the fact that how come the same constituency in England, the working class constituency in England, who previously would have voted for people of our political persuasion, now votes extreme right, and in Europe as well. And again, the States probably a less clear example. So if nothing comes out of this meeting, then people actually think about these issues and how the left reads people's feelings, or how the left relate to our constituency. As somebody here said, what we do in this room is only semi-relevant. It's what the mass of people do. Hopefully we will have some input impact if we do have a revolutionary situation. But what we can do in here is only semi-relevant. So if nothing else today, hopefully people will think about, do the left genuinely represent the people they would wish to? Do they genuinely relate to the people they would wish to? Do they see the same difficulties that people in working class communities see? And whether people agree or disagree with me, The very fact that people are even thinking about this, I think, is a positive.
Thanks very much, Kieran. There's some food for thought there.
Sorry, can I just say one last thing, Thomas? The word populist shouldn't be used as a term of abuse. I want to be a populist. I want my politics to be popular. It's when during the anti-drugs movement, people called us vigilantes because of whatever the necessary actions that went on. And some people spent a long time denying the label. When if you look up the definition of vigilante, it basically means vigilant for your community. So the likes of us should be proud to be vigilantes. We should be proud to be populist. It doesn't mean we're changing our politics. It means our politics are becoming popular.
Thanks, Kieran. So I have to wrap up now. I think that I hope you've enjoyed the session in terms of the to and fro and the question and answer and I would like to thank Bernadette and Kieran for their contributions, and I'll hand you back over to Garage now for the conclusion of this. Thanks, guys.
Bernadette, August Kieran, and that's the last panel discussion. We've done a lot of serious discussion today. We've done a lot of thinking. It's been a long day's politics. We have a treat in store for you because we're going to, in a sense, wind it down towards the conclusion.